accessed the podcast of OA. Located deep within Sector 14845 and powered by the Emerald Light of Will, the podcast of OA is your guide to the Green Lantern universe. Hosted by Lantern Myron R'amey, the podcast of OA begins now.
Hey Green Lantern fans, this is Myron R'amey bringing you back to another episode of the podcast of OA. This is episode number 211, and I think we've got a really good, fun one lined up. I'm joined by my good buddy Phil Bova. Phil, my friend, how's life treating you? I know it's going to be getting near the end of the school year for you.
It is. 1 week left. Looking forward to it. I think I get to spend all my time with Clark.
That'll be fun.
And save myself $800 a month. Yeah, it's gonna be a good time. Looking forward to it. It's my slow time now because everything's just getting, while everybody's winding down doing finals. So I've been just stuck in my office, been reading a couple books, and it's been kind of great.
Good. Well, yeah, this is going to be a fun episode. We're going to go back to 1988, which will be a lot of fun. And this is a listener suggested topic. So I'm really looking forward to that. But as usual, before we get into our comic book talk, we've got some Green Lantern news. Today, we're recording this on May 20th. And today, the solicitations came out for books for August of 2022. And for a month where there's no Green Lantern ongoing series, there sure is a lot of Green Lantern stuff going on, which is good news. It's exciting stuff. Dark Crisis number 3 is going to be coming out in August, and the cover shows Hal and a Justice League ring construct going after Pariah. So that should be really exciting. I'm looking forward to that one. And we're going to get Dark Crisis Worlds Without a Justice League, Green Lantern number 1. It's a one-shot. And that's going to have John and Kyle, and the Red Hood is a Green Lantern. But obviously this does not mean continuity. That'll be interesting. Kyle's going to be kind of a mystical sage type guy, an oracle type of character, which is interesting.
Yeah, I wonder where they're taking that storyline.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. I'm interested in that one. And then they just announced Deceased War of the Undead Gods, which is going to have the virus from Deceased infecting the new gods. And that's really interesting.
That's cool.
8-issue series, yeah. And it looks like from the preview images they've released, and from what I've read so far, it's going to have Hal somehow, which he died in the first one, so I'm not sure what they're doing there. Maybe he comes back to life. Don't know. But Guy, John, Jessica, and Sinestro all play roles in this one. So,
well, I know Sinestro. I think Sinestro gets infected. I think that's what Tom Taylor. He didn't mention it, but I think it was alluded to that he gets infected. So that's going to look interesting.
Oh, that'll be interesting. I didn't hear that one. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't hear that one. That's cool. I don't know if you picked up Jurassic League. I did not, but it looks like a fun, crazy title. Justice League Dinosaurs, essentially. The second or third issue, I can't remember which. I think it might be the third issue. Comes out in August, and it shows the Green Torch, which is a Green Lantern dinosaur. What looks like he's suplexing an Atrocitus dinosaur. So that's really kind of funny.
So, what kind of dinosaur is he? Do you know? I haven't seen it.
I'm not sure. I know it said it somewhere, but I didn't make that in my show notes. I didn't list it.
It's funny they come out with something like that, and then ironically, the new Jurassic movie's coming out pretty soon too.
Right. But it looks like crazy, goofy fun. So I might have to pick up the first issue just to dive into it. It reminds me of what was it, Primal Age? Which was the ones that came out a couple of years ago through Target. That was interesting too. It could be just a crazy fun book. And speaking of crazy fun books, they're doing a DC mech series. And I saw an image that showed Hal and John together, almost like it was a mech that required 2 pilots maybe, or maybe they each have a mech. I'm not exactly sure. But in issue number 2, they talk about, they say Green Lanterns. So that looks like it is Hal and John. Based on what I heard before. So that'll be interesting. Another, it's wildly fun and crazy ideas, which is good because for me, they're not hitting out of the park with the regular stuff, but this stuff certainly looks fun.
Yeah, and they're just appealing to a lot of different people here.
Yeah.
I'll pick up the Mac one. That sounds cool. I saw some of the images from it. Looks really good.
Yeah, yeah. There's also a Multiversity Young Justice book, which I hadn't paid attention to, but in issue 3, they go to Earth 11 and Hal Ferris shows up, which, if you remember back during the Morrison run, when we saw this is the universe where the planet where the gender roles are reversed. So it's Carol Jordan essentially and Hal Ferris. That'll be interesting. That'll be kind of cool. And then it looks like Hal. I can't say for certain it's Hal, but it looks like Hal's on the cover, the variant cover to Swamp Thing number 16.
I had to rotate that image because it was upside down.
Yeah. I don't know what to make about that one. I've never been a huge Swamp Thing fan, but there was I think a variant cover for the 15th or 14th issue that actually showed him Swamp Thing with a Green Lantern logo on his chest. So I might have to check that one out.
I will say this though, I don't care what anybody says. Nobody could write Swamp Thing like Alan Moore.
I'm sure. Yeah. I for some reason, it didn't resonate with me. So I never really got into Swamp Thing at all. But I can understand why people would be interested in it because it looks kind of cool. I don't know why it just never resonated with me for some reason.
Do you remember the cheesy movies?
Yeah. I think I watched that movie because it had, what is her name?
Oh, Adrienne
Barbeau. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, she was in Escape from New York also.
So I think I might have seen it for that. I loved her in Creepshow. That was always one of my favorite roles she was in.
Right, she was in that too. Yeah, she was an attractive woman.
She was the professor's wife, and the creature in the box eats her, the Tasmanian devil type creature.
He pushes her in there.
Yeah, that was cool. And then I, as much as we don't like Batman in Batman Fortress number 4, it looks like Badge is on the variant cover. So I don't know whether he's making an appearance. I mean, I would imagine so. Otherwise, you wouldn't have him on the variant cover. But whether he's actually in the issue or not, because you know how marketing is, it's hard to say. But it looks like Badge might be inside of that issue.
I just don't understand at this point why DC just don't market everything Batman and just have other characters as their side characters. I mean, you could do Batman Green Lantern, and then just do variant issues and have a different Green Lantern every so often. You know?
Yeah, I don't know.
If they want their sales to increase that much, I mean, there might be something they could think about.
Yeah, you never know. It's hard to say. Hard to say. But so anyway, we're going to be talking about Action Comics Weekly in this episode. And this comes from a listener voicemail we got. And it was a great suggestion. So I thought, well, hey, rather than just make it a comment thing, we could make a whole episode out of it. So that's what we're going to do.
Give me a good time.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation and talking a little bit about it and some of the history behind the story and some of the things that's happened since that story was published with some of the characters in it. So you and I will be back shortly. We've got to do a Know Your Core segment, and after that, we'll be back talking about Action Comics Weekly.
Fellow Owens, welcome back to another Know Your Core segment. This week, we have a character by the name of R'amey Holl, who hails from Sector 700. Her partner is Von Daggle. Her creators, Keith Champagne, Patrick Gleason. R'amey Holl from Sector 700 appeared in Green Lantern Corps number 7. She was an entomorphic humanoid, exhibiting traits similar to those of a butterfly. R'amey was a member of the Corps covert group known as the Corps. She later disappeared and was last seen by Guy Gardner and hasn't been heard of in 1 year. Due to the undercover nature of her operations, no one is looking for her at the time. She appears in several group scenes in live-action Green Lantern film and other blind box mini storylines. There you have it, fellow Owens. R'amey Holl from Sector 700.
In brightest day, in blackest night, no evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power, Green Lantern's light!
Love R'amey Holl. She's one of my favorite characters. I met Keith Champagne at a convention a few years ago, and he mentioned that they were going to do a Green Lantern Corps mini, and it's already been written and drawn and finished and everything, and Jeff Johns didn't like it and how it interfered with what his vision was for the Green Lantern Corps, so it got poo-pooed and shut down, even though the work was all done, the artist was paid for and everything. So it's never seen the light of day. But yeah, she's a really neat character, very butterfly looking. Just cool character.
It's funny how all those projects just fall wayside and they never see the light of day. Makes you wonder how many are out there, you know?
Yeah. It'd be neat even, now because you've got the whole Omniverse thing, you could do that story. Or, we're past the Jeff Johns era, you could still publish it. I think they'd be interested in it. I mean, they used R'amey Holl. I think it was during the Van Jensen run on Green Lantern Corps. They did a revisit of that with Von Dagel and so on. And it was really cool. It was neat to see that story. It's funny, later on, her name is going to come up again later this episode. But anyway, this particular episode, we're going to be talking about Action Comics Weekly. And this particular story we're going to talk about takes place in Action Comics Weekly 632 to 635. But before we get into it, this came from a voicemail that we received from a listener by his name is Zach. He's a friend of ours from the show, a longtime listener. And he was talking about this story. So I thought before we started talking about the comic, we'd play his voicemail rather than play it later, because we're going to talk about everything he talks about in the voicemail anyway. So let's take a quick pause and play Zach's voicemail, and then we will come back and start talking about the comic.
Hey guys, this is Zach Parkerson here. I was with the whole Thorn run thing, kind of leaving us with the lack of Green Lantern. I've been reading old comics, and I came across Action Comics Weekly towards the tail end of Hal Jordan having issues there, and the story of Malvolio. And I was just getting fascinated with this character, and I know back in the day, a lot of fans thought it would be a good excuse for getting out of the Parallax thing, but I would say that's nonsense, because why wouldn't Hal change his ring out the first chance he could, instead of using a madman's ring, especially since he restarted the Corps, like only an issue or two after this in his own title. But I just wanted to ask a couple of Lantern historians, what do you think of the character of Malvolio? Did he intrigue you, or do you think it's a plot thread that was just kind of dropped prematurely? Anyway, thanks a lot, guys, and excellent show. You guys have really helped us all keep our sanity through, let's say, the ups and downs of the recent Green Lantern run.
So, Zach, thank you for the voicemail. This was a great idea, and I know you were suggesting it as just listener feedback, but when I was thinking about it, I thought, Lord Val Malvolio's got some interesting history behind him that really kind of warrants having a bigger conversation than what we would normally do in our listener feedback. So to kind of give some feedback to Action Comics Weekly and what happened during that time frame, this was, right in the late 80s, and Steve Englehart and Joe Staton had come on to Green Lantern, and in about a 6-month time frame, they had, according to Englehart, doubled the sales of the Green Lantern title. So it was going off on gangbusters. He transitioned the series to a Green Lantern Corps book, an ensemble book, and that success led to the whole Millennium event, which we talked about not too long ago on this show. And ultimately, DC had ambitions of doing a weekly series for a long time. They decided to use Action Comics for that as a platform to do a weekly book. And they wanted something to help anchor it, to push people towards buying a weekly book, because, hey, that's more revenue. So they decided to cancel the Green Lantern Corps series and push Green Lantern over to the Action Comics Weekly book to anchor it and kind of push direction and interest towards that series. What ended up happening was, for Steve Englehart and Joe Staton, they didn't like the idea of having to write 7-page snippets. So both of them walked away from the series and the characters. In walks James Owsley, I mispronounced it. And he wrote all of the Green Lantern bits, most of them, in the beginning of the Action Comics Weekly run, which included even the moment where Kat Matui was killed by Star Sapphire. He left the book for a little bit. Peter David came on, and then Owsley came back. And Owsley paired himself with M.D. Bright as the writer, or as the artist, excuse me. So that leads into issue 632. And this is the last Green Lantern arc of Action Comics Weekly. When this ends, they are getting ready to launch the new Green Lantern series and doing Emerald Dawn, which we'll talk a little bit after we get done here. But again, there's only 7 pages per issue. So even though it covers 4 issues, it's like having a regular book, like an oversized issue, this entire story. And Owsley goes into a whole thing about creating a new villain and tying it into, he connects the dots between the Green Lantern Corps and back to Alan Scott and back to Yalen Gur and all of those things. He kind of tries to tie it all together and creates a completely different kind of character, which is really kind of exciting. And it's fun to go back and revisit these stories because, again, the writing is different. Even the paper's different, as you were commenting off, Mike, is that, this is back before the glossy paper stuff.
Yeah. And the smell was different.
Yeah.
The comic books always have a distinct smell. Anybody who knows that knows that. I mean, they all smell the same. Well, I mean, unless you got the really, really bad mildewy ones. But at the same time, if it's an old comic book, the old comic books have a distinct scent to them. It's just unique. And any comic book fan, if you don't know what I'm talking about, go find a comic book store and sniff them. Just hold them up and sniff them. You know what I'm talking about.
You may get it from some funny looks, but
yeah, that's okay.
there's a distinct old comic book smell. It should be a perfume, a cologne for men. They could do like a golden age and a silver age.
Oh my God.
Anyway, the story starts off with Hal pursuing this shrine, which has caused some issues, and he's chasing this shrine through space, and he ends up getting pulled through a portal and ends up in this starless void area, and he has no idea where he is. His ring can't tell him where it is. There's some planets there kind of orbiting what looks like a red sun, and he basically goes there and finds some beings which remind him of some beings he saw when he visited Sector 1634. And he did that back in Action Comics Weekly number 623, where he met a former Green Lantern by the name of Priest, which again in the footnotes of this story is going to be an interesting thing in and of itself. But while he's in the starless void, the first thing that happens is after he meets this alien, he discovers a castle which has very Earth-like architecture, and he walks in there and he meets this character by the name of Lord Malvolio. And when you look at him visually, you can see almost like old Elizabethan England meets Alan Scott's uniform.
Yeah, it's really cool looking. He's awesome looking sitting on that throne.
Yeah, too. And he's also, you don't get an idea from his first image, but he's a much larger than normal person. I mean, at one point when he's fighting Hal, he can kind of take Hal's cranium in his entire hand.
Yeah, he's holding that big chalice.
And is he a talker?
Yes. There's a lot of dialogue in these books.
Yeah, there's an awful lot of dialogue. But Malvolio claims to be from Earth and that he was in some way cast out, and that he himself was the reason why Hal got there. And he's going to make sure that Hal never leaves. And at this point, we believe that he's brought Hal there for the sport of it, to have a worthy combatant. And
it's important to note that he is of the Green Flame.
Yes.
Malvolio.
Yes, that's a very good point, Phil. He mentions Lord Malvolio of the Green Flame, which again ties it back to Alan Scott. So there's a sense that, this is almost a golden age character. This guy's been around for a while.
He's really cool, and he'd be somebody that really could be brought forward and utilized in such a unique way.
Oh yeah, very very unique character, and he's very. I don't know if I want to say cruel and vicious, but he's got that same mindset like a Darkseid or a Mongol does in terms of how he treats other beings. This creature who's there serves Malvolio, but yet he destroys the guy because the guy's trying to give Hal some advice and some guidance. Right. And Malvolio just kind of obliterates him, which again makes you wonder because he's got a Green Lantern ring on, but he can kill. And remember, this is in an era in which the Green Lantern rings did not have the ability to kill anyone. And that wraps up the first issue. That's 632. When you jump over to issue 633, this issue is, Hal's pretty much decided this Malvolio guy is a nutter from his perspective.
Yeah.
And the two of them get into this issue is a lot of battle fight stuff going on in this issue. And at one point, Malvolio punches Hal through the planet. And he hits Hal so hard, he goes through the planet and comes out the other side. Which is just
his part where he says that tears it.
Yeah, Hal's ticked. and that's right before Malvolio's like, this is power. And he punches him through the planet. And it's cool. The visual shows you the planet. And he's starting in one end and the line goes all the way through the center of the core of the plaza and out the other side. And Hal's like, he put me right through the planet. I can't believe this. So Hal uses the opportunity of having quite a bit of distance put between the two of them. He goes off into the void trying to find something, and he finds a gold space station. And Malvolio's ring, we don't know whether it works on yellow or not. I get the impression it doesn't, but that maybe he doesn't understand that maybe building your space station out of gold isn't a good idea for him. And Hal encounters more of the alien beings there, and there he meets Wallace, who's Malvolio's squire. And Wallace, we get the impression Wallace is trying to help Hal, but at the same time, he's in servitude to Malvolio. And we learned that Malvolio got his ring by killing his own father, who himself was a Green Lantern. And the station is a complete shrine to Malvolio, and Malvolio comes at Hal again. And that ends this issue. So again, these move rather quickly. But, we're finding out more and more as you go on that Malvolio is not exactly what you think he might be. He's certainly this brutal guy who pulls no punches, literally. But there's something going on. I mean, this guy was so vicious he killed his own father to take his Green Lantern ring.
Did they ever say what his father's name was?
No, they do not.
I didn't think they did. Okay.
So when we get to issue 634, it starts out with, a big face shot of Lord Malvolio again, talking about the green flame thing, and they keep trying to draw things to that. There's a neat line in the beginning of this where it starts out with, behold the face of fear. This is a guy who is it says here, he's both worshipped and despised.
Makes sense. Kind of acting like an a-hole anyway.
Yeah. And again, there's a lot of monologuing going on.
A lot of monologuing.
And a lot of it is, this is giving Hal a chance to recover a little bit because Hal's been through a planet. he's pretty wiped out at this point. And we learn as he's monologuing that Malvolio hates Priest, that Priest defeated him and imprisoned him in the void. And the reason why Priest is no longer a Green Lantern was because the Guardians told him to kill Malvolio, and he refused to. And instead, he imprisoned him in this starless void.
So what, man? Those Guardians.
Yeah. So Malvolio, while he was, this guy's brilliant. While he's a brilliant madman. While he's in this starless void, he comes up with a way to observe what's going on outside of the void and trying to figure out, how am I going to get out of here? And he's observing Priest, who he hates. He's sitting there just loathing Priest from afar and getting crazier and more driven by his hatred with every passing moment. And he sees Hal interacting with Priest, so Hal becomes a target of his fixation. And so he's thinking, well, this is a guy who could become my heir apparent. And if I can get him on my side, the two of us could defeat Priest if he'll get me out of my cell. So he's trying to intimidate Hal to the point at which Hal will be subservient to him, help him escape, and then they'll together go and take Priest down. What we learn is that Malvolio, while he says he's human, he's really only half human. And that his father was the previous Green Lantern of 1634. So Priest is a successor of Malvolio's father, which makes you wonder, is the ring that Malvolio's wearing really his father's ring, or does Priest have his father's ring? And it's never really explicitly implied which way it is. You don't know whether his ring is really a Green Lantern ring or something that he's made, and maybe that's why it gets around the death thing, or is it because he still has his ring and this is before they put those limitations in place? I don't know. Part of me was like, if this guy's got a Green Lantern ring, why can't he himself get out? Because he knew how to get Hal in, but he couldn't get himself out of there. But at one point, Malvolio's father traveled to Earth and married a human woman, and she died in childbirth. So Malvolio was raised by his father, who he then eventually killed and took his ring. And all of this monologuing gives Hal a chance to partially recover. And Hal takes it to Malvolio and does, a good job of trying to take Malvolio out. And then, Hal kind of turns his back on him a little bit, and Malvolio destroys the ring. So Hal has lost his ring, and here he is on this space station, which is not in very good shape because he basically, Malvolio blew the station up and damaged it critically in the process of dealing with us and killed all the people who were subservient to him on the station. He killed them all in this fight. But Malvolio uses a yellow beam to blow up Hal's ring. So now Hal's like, this is going to hurt a lot because he could barely survive fighting Malvolio to begin with. And now he doesn't even have a power ring to help him. That takes us to the final chapter in 635. And this has Hal trying to survive in this gold space station without a ring, with what Hal has deemed the deadliest menace he's ever faced. So Hal values Malvolio as a much greater threat than even Sinestro at this point. As Hal's trying to get his way through things, he finds his way to the armory. And he gets himself a cannon, which he straps onto himself. And he is trying to fight with the cannon. But when he goes to shoot the cannon for the first time, he ends up just doing more damage to the ship than he did to Malvolio. He essentially misses. But this cannon is so powerful. It's got a whole harness that basically, I don't know how to describe it, but it reminds me a little bit of Orion's outfit, with the ankle cuffs and a backpack and chest straps.
Sure.
So Hal's like trying to figure out, well, what am I going to do? At one point he does so much damage to the space station that the atmosphere is getting sucked out. Malvolio plugs up the space station, gives Hal a few more seconds to try to figure out what the heck he's going to do. And Hal takes the harness, and the harness has kind of like this spring-loaded stuff to help his feet give him support. And Hal takes that off, taking a lesson from all of his time spent with Oliver Queen, and he takes the brace off the back of his leg, fashions it into an arrow, and shoots a yellow piece of material that he finds on the ground, a shaft of metal, and launches it and pierces Malvolio through the chest and kills him. Hal then is, of course, he's like, I think of Malvolio lying there, I feel sick and empty. And it's because he feels like, God, I just killed this guy. Because again, at this point in time, Green Lanterns didn't kill. So Hal takes Malvolio's ring because it looks like the original one. And since he's traveled between here and Earth, maybe he can get back to Earth. So he leaves. And after he leaves, Malvolio starts talking and he goes, excellent. This was all a ruse. Apparently everything we saw was all things that he did, all illusions he created to trick Hal into taking Malvolio's ring. And he's like, okay, this has gone according to my plan. Hal Jordan is confidant of mine internal, my enemy, a confidant of Priest, now sails through the cosmos wearing my ring. And soon shall the day come that he shall serve me in my war against both Priest and the blue-skinned elder god he serves, which is how he refers to the Guardians. And then he says, and I'll await the day when Hal Jordan and I shall meet again. And it ends up with just a single shot of Malvolio. So a lot of this was illusion. And that ended the story. So the footnote to this is that they relaunched Emerald Dawn, and Priest, at this point, Owsley started writing Emerald Dawn. And he wrote the first issue of Emerald Dawn and he plotted the second. But he and DC had some issues and some creative differences. And he left DC and he left the whole comic book industry for a while. When he returned a little while later, he had legally changed his name to Christopher Priest, which is interesting. And now he just goes by the name Priest. And Priest actually brought Malvolio back in a novel series. I don't know whether, Phil, have you ever seen those novels called Sleepers?
I have. I do remember those.
So there was one book that was an Alan Scott series, a book, and there was one book that was a Kyle Rayner book, and then the third issue was a Hal book. And it was an overarching plot to all three books. And Priest plotted out all three of the books, and he wrote the third one. He didn't want to deal with Hal Specter because these books were coming out during the Hal Specter days. So his plots that he laid out for the other two writers involved returning Hal as a Green Lantern, so that when he inherited the third part of the story, he could just write a Hal as Green Lantern thing, which is what he wanted. Well, what ended up happening was the writers didn't follow through with his plots. So when he got to the third book, Hal was still the Spectre. So he had to deal with the whole Spectre thing in his run. But what he didn't know was at the time he was writing the books, DC was planning Green Lantern Rebirth, where Hal goes back from being the Spectre.
That's funny.
He's currently writing a new book for DC. It's a Black Adam book.
Oh, that's good. Oh, is that one that's coming out? I think I might pick that up. That looks really interesting.
Yep.
They're really pushing that character a lot.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, when you look at Malvolio, you really get strong Alan Scott vibes. And we think what Priest was trying to allude to was that when his father was a Green Lantern, that was the Green Lantern uniform, because we saw it on Yalan Gur. And Yalan Gur's outfit kind of dictated what Alan Scott chose retroactively. So I think they're trying to allude that this might have been at one time the de facto Green Lantern outfit.
That would have been interesting. I wonder, have you looked up who the Green Lantern was of Sector 1634?
Never been named.
Okay.
But the interesting side note to this whole thing is, back when Emerald Twilight came out, fans like myself were looking for what could have caused Hal to act the way he acted, because it was so out of character. And I know people like to say, well, they destroyed Coast City, but Hal really wasn't that emotionally connected to Coast City like Superman is connected to Metropolis or Batman is connected to Gotham City. So for a lot of fans like myself, we were trying to wrap our heads around it. How do we make this story kind of work? And Malvolio came up as a fan theory, because Hal, even though, and as Zach points out, he felt like it didn't make sense that Hal didn't exchange this ring for another one. Maybe he didn't for whatever reason. And if he was wearing Malvolio's ring, could Malvolio have been influencing him from afar? And that's what caused him to go mad, because one of his goals was to take out the Guardians.
So it's a good theory, but it ain't going to be watertight, because at some point along the way, since this took back 80s, right?
88.
You'd think that at some point along the way, they would have fleshed that out, some writer somewhere.
Apparently, Priest had plans for Malvolio to be an ongoing recurring villain.
And he should be. I think he's really, really cool. I think it'd be cool to see how he's written from different writers, let alone the artist on this did a really good job. MD Bright or whatever.
Yeah, MD Bright. Yeah, I've always liked his artwork, and I thought Malvolio had a lot of potential. And apparently, he had plans to make him part of a supervillain team up, where it was kind of like a League of Bad Guys kind of thing. But DC apparently didn't like the Malvolio idea, and that might have been one of the reasons why he left DC. I'm not exactly sure. But I've always kind of thought Malvolio was an interesting character. It could have played out if DC had decided to go that way. I like John's version better, tying it back to Sinestro, because there's just more intent with Sinestro. There's more history there. It just made more sense to me. Right. But at the time when we were going through the whole Emerald Twilight era, it seemed like a very plausible thing, because we never saw Hal get a different ring after the story. So you could read it as he had Malvolio's ring on, and did that in effect cause that to happen? And then, did that ring, because it got crushed and then turned into Kyle's ring, was that part of Oblivion? So there was this ongoing thing. Well, this ring is it's not a regular ring. It may look like a Green Lantern ring, but it's not the same. It never came to play, but it certainly was an interesting fan theory.
Fans come up with them, man.
Yeah. At the time, it seemed very plausible. It seemed more plausible than what we got, to be honest, but in my opinion.
Well, no, that's airtight. What we got is nothing.
Yeah. But anyway, Zach, thank you so much for that whole thing, the idea for it. Malvolio was a really cool character. I'd love to see somebody do something with that character again at some point, because I think there's just so much potential there. that this guy, you know, he's got the physicality of a Mongol, the looniness of, I don't want to say the Joker because he's not that kind of loony. He's just mad. You know, he's over the top. And you combine those two things together with kind of the strategist of a Sinestro, and it's a cool character.
Yeah, I like the way he looks too.
Yeah. Yeah, the design is rock solid.
Mm-hmm.
You know, talks a little bit too much, but you know, a different writer could resolve that without an issue.
I totally want to thank Zach for introducing me to him. I never heard of the character until he mentioned him, and we started talking about doing this episode, and I was like, I'm gonna look him up. And I started looking him up. I was like, man, this guy's cool.
Yeah.
What's wrong with you people? Why would you not have this guy around?
I know. It's crazy, but I obviously had read it back in the day, so it was fun to go back and reread it. You know, it's funny because I've got 8 long boxes behind me full of Green Lantern comics, and you've got all the trade paperbacks and all that kind of stuff too. But it's just fun to take the old floppies out.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to say it's just nostalgia, but it takes you back.
It really is. So like we talked off mic, or I was texting you about my new hobby of collecting all the Cyborg Superman cover issues. And so I've been getting them on eBay and stuff, and when they come in, I take them out, and I've been reading through them and stuff. And the scent, scent comes up, flipping through the old books. There's nothing like it.
It's funny because when you crack open the bag, it comes and hits you right in the face. You know,
it really does.
Suddenly you're like 12 years old again. You know, it's cool. Well, my power ring is blinking. We've got some listener feedback. So why don't we take a quick pause, and when we come back, we will cover listener feedback.
This is Salak, Green Lantern of Sector 1418, and you are receiving the podcast of Oa.
The podcast of Oa.
Green Lanterns Phil and Myron. We have one piece of listener feedback, and that is from Ken. He is commenting on the Jeff Thorne run as well as asking a couple of questions. Transmitting the message in 3, 2, 1.
Hi Myron and Phil. I wanted to share my thoughts about the Thorne run now that it is finally over. I hated this series through and through, and I am glad/hoping it is over. Thorne's friend Perch made a whole video about the run being cut short, 14 issues in, but your videos always made each issue better, especially issue 12, which is too confusing on its own. My thing with the beacon is, why would the Lanterns even need to recreate their rings? Weren't there a bunch of rings in that bowl that Wally grabbed? Wouldn't the Lanterns put on their rings again and try to recharge as normal, which I thought they naturally did? And if they were wearing their rings, why did some of them transform into blues and star sapphires, which wouldn't really be compatible? It would be unfair and just selfish on John's part to force some Lanterns to be star sapphires and blue Lanterns. If you're gonna do that to Yolandi and BDG, why don't you join the blues and star sapphires then yourself, John? You have godlike power. You couldn't have recharged the star sapphires and blues across the universe? Or sent blue and sapphire rings out to find recruits instead of wasting your time rebuilding Oa? And how could Lanterns like Yolandi and BDG be able to use blue and sapphire abilities if they are only really capable of green/will? I always think of the explanation/excuse Mosaic Comics and the Lantern cast gave for Joe and Hal not being able to switch rings since they are powered by different kinds of power sources. Going back to John, if you could rebuild Oa and make rings out of nothing, why bother making everybody believe you're dead and go to the dark sectors by yourself? You couldn't have led these new Lanterns? You say you want the Ghost to help them, but come on. You were the leader once before, John, and you aren't the Guardian, so it is okay for you to do so again and make it easier for everybody. And you couldn't have just grabbed/created a few rings for Kilowog and the rest to use so they can quickly resolve all of this garbage with Isak? The source literally says that John's powers regenerate, so what's the excuse? You could solve all of these issues so quickly with your powers if Thorne wasn't writing everyone like such morons. And with Simon, I'm honestly disgusted with his ending. Having the rings recreate their owners just feels wrong. If that was the case, why wouldn't Hal's ring come back as Abin Sur? Or Cyranix as Katmatui? Is it because Hal's ring exploded, but what about the rest? If the rings didn't explode for the ones who died, I doubt the ones who lived had theirs destroyed either. Would the surviving Lanterns now have 2 rings, one built by the beacon and then the second that is recreating their predecessor? And is it the rings masquerading as the dead Lanterns, or did the rings somehow capture their spirits? Also, I hope those rings just flew to Oa, because the thought that the United Planets pickpocketed the rings off of the cold, dead bodies of these heroes is just deplorable. Either way, that's not the point of the ring succession. A Lantern/recruit is meant to take over for their predecessor, not have the Lantern live on in their ring. Why wouldn't all the Lanterns just come back as constructs? A Ghost Lantern Corps sounds kind of effective but horrifying. It's just not Green Lantern at that point, and personally, it feels disgusting and insulting. When I wanted these great characters to live, I didn't want them to come back as ghosts. And why would John give Simon that role? The other Lanterns can see the ghosts, so if you really needed Simon to be that tether, which is just, no, why not allow him to be a Lantern too like the others? And how will the personal batteries work now? Do they siphon power from the new beacon? Awful name? I mean, clearly, Thorne didn't give a rat's behind about the personal batteries since they never appeared in this entire series, but still, how do the Lanterns power up when they're not on Oa, and how do their powers recharge? You can't have some rings turn into ghosts, some turn into other colors, and some act as normal rings or even appear out of nowhere. It's just random and nonsensical. Everything about this series has felt irrelevant, unearned, and convenient. When John's ring shorts out, there's a Lantern to sacrifice themselves for him to live. Pirates are attacking? John just defeats them immediately, Phantom Menace style. He has to stop a new god from taking over a planet? Lonar is there to take John back in time so he can be shot by Darkseid and unlock godlike power. And then the massive threat of Isak that has killed millions? He just shoots it once. And even when a storm breaks out that could consume the universe, John just has to absorb it into himself and then choose his own future. Maybe it's just the speed of this series, but it feels like there is no struggle for John as he immediately has to fight Koyos, and even then, he just punches and lunges at Koyos as if John doesn't have the godlike power to stop him in a more logical way than fighting him like a caveman. And then he doesn't even defeat him, Joe just has to stab him in the back with Kelly's gauntlet, which she got just for asking politely. The connection between Simon and Kelly is completely worthless, and both characters are pretty much forgotten by the end of the story. The same thing with the Sinestro Corps, whose story in this series contributed nothing to the plot than to put Kelly in a coma. The Bright Circle and Koyos, the big threats for the last year? Defeated and immediately forgotten. No effort to actually develop these villains and make them memorable or interesting. And John's sacrifice is just as bad as Kyle's in Lights Out, with no one putting any effort into looking for him and assuming what happened. At least Kyle crossing the source wall and back felt unique and special. And it's complete BS that John comes back to the dark sectors by himself. He's almighty and then just brings a sword? What is Thorne's obsession with making John a pirate? John is not a pirate, he is a soldier and architect. Again, if John couldn't build more rings or bring the Lanterns together, why did he waste his powers rebuilding Oa? The source even tells him that his tank will always refill, so what's the point with this charade? At the end of the day, all of these changes are John/Thorne's decisions, and it just makes John look like a dumb jerk with no plan. I know there's meant to be 2 more arcs, but come on, it's been 14 issues. What kind of writer can't write a competent, comprehensible book over a year's worth of comics? I cancelled my pull list after reading GL Monthly for 10 years, I started with GL 19 from the New 52, and I just feel sad. I should have cancelled it at the beginning of the Morrison run, but for me, getting into comics when GL held 4 to 6 books a month and seeing it die down to 1 made me want to support the franchise as much as possible before it could possibly be reverted back to just a backup story like in the late 80s, which just sounds like an embarrassing nightmare. At this point, I just don't care. Your reviews of the John's run have been more fun than every single GL book that has come out since the end of the Venditti run, and even then, it wasn't that great at the end, and the GL community is stronger than the idiots working in the DC office. As much as I love GL, I can't support what DC is doing anymore. I would be honored to come on your show and talk about how awesome GL is, but I'm going to try to stay away from the recent garbage. As a thank you for listening to my rant, I wanted to share 2 fun questions with you. A. What are your 5 favorite GL uniforms/costumes? This isn't restricted to the Human Lanterns, but don't just choose 5 aliens who all wear Hal's suit. Personally, my top 5 are, from top to bottom, New 52 Hal, Jim Lee's Kyle design, Kyle's classic uniform, Joe Mullen's costume, and Ty Phom's costume. I also like Lara's uniforms from the comics and animated movies. B. This is a bit of a basic question, but do you prefer Alan Scott and Hal Jordan on the same Earth or on separate ones? I prefer the same Earth as it establishes a legacy for the GL role. I know that you don't care too much for that aspect, Myron, but I think legacy is a huge part of Hal's character, especially after the John's run, as he carries Abin Sur's ring and wears his father's jacket while trying to redefine his legacy with Kyle and John.
All right, well, Ken, thank you so much for the email. I don't want to go back over all of the problems I had with the Thorn run, but Ken makes some very good points, and they echo a lot of the things that you and I talked about in terms of critiques. So I don't want to go over it again because I think we've kind of beat this dead horse a bit. What do you think, Phil?
I don't know. I mean, yeah, but I'm a little worried about what's to come.
Yeah.
At the time, I kind of want to distance myself from the first 12 because it's like I ate that, so I just kind of want to wet my palate until I have to get ready to eat some more. You know what?
Yeah,
I'm not gonna lie. I'm a fan true and true, and at the same time, and we've mentioned this throughout this podcast over countless times. We all have our likes. We don't have to like everything, and I'm not going to be that fan that likes everything just because I like Green Lantern, and I will read the books. That doesn't mean that every writer's going to come along. It's automatically I'm going to be like, this is the best thing ever. This is the best thing ever, and I'm not going to keep repeating myself.
Yeah.
Writers come along that don't write a certain way that you just don't like. It happens with everything, not just comic books. It happens with everything. It happens with television shows for crying out loud.
Yeah.
So I mean, for this 12 issues was a crap run. It was total crap. It wasn't Green Lantern to me, and that's how it was. I'm sorry, right. And I'm not sorry really.
I consider myself a Green Lantern booster, but I can't just because it's got Green Lantern on it or anything that just because it's you throw Green Lantern on it doesn't mean I'm going to be all excited. I'm excited to see Green Lantern. I mean, take it the wrong way, but if the quality isn't there, I'm not going to be I'm not so desperate for Green Lantern content. I guess that's the way to put it. I'm not so desperate for Green Lantern content that I'm willing to accept stuff that I think stinks. And I felt that run stunk. So anyway, Ken's got a couple of interesting questions at the end. And the first one is, what are our five favorite Green Lantern uniforms and costumes? And he mentions his top 5, which are really good ones. And yeah, I'm not going to do 5 people that have Hal's costume. Not going to do that. But anyway, Phil, do you have some favorite uniforms that are your favorites?
Yeah, I do. I liked Hal's Renegade. I like that run. That's still one of my favorite runs. But I liked his outfit in there. I thought he looked really cool. I really, really like Boudica when she was an Alpha Lantern. I thought that was cool. Sodom Yacht. I liked Kyle Rayner with Ion when he was Ion. That's about it, really.
Okay. So my top, you and I have one that's in the same. We both agree on one of them. We have both of them in our top 5. My number 1 is the post Rebirth Hal. I love the redesign. They took the classic Gil Kane design and just tweaked it subtly, but it looks great. And I think it looks better than the swimsuit bottom. So I love that as the Hal's outfit, even over the Gil Kane one. But I also liked, earlier you were talking about R'amey Holl. I loved Guy Gardner's Green Lantern Corps outfit from that plot line, which was really cool because it kind of dealt with the stealthiness. Like it seemed in some places where it was black, some places where it was really a dark green. It was really cool looking. It was much more of a tactical combat undercover outfit, which I thought was a neat spin on what you normally see people in. I also love Auricio's outfit. I just thought it was a very feminine, very, very space. I always, whenever I see her outfit, it reminds me of if Green Lantern appeared on Star Trek and this was an alien woman that Kirk was going to have a fling with, that'd be what she would be dressed like.
Right.
So I loved that. And I also loved Hal's God of Light uniform from back during the Darkseid War. And it was it was in just a very few issues, but I loved that design. I thought it was so cool looking. And then probably the one that you and I agree on is Boudica. And I love both her regular and Alpha Lantern. I'm going to kind of cheat and get 6 because I love her regular outfit and her Alpha Lantern costume.
It can count as 2 because she's a cool character anyway.
Yeah. I liked her movie design too. You mentioned earlier R'amey Holl and her movie. She appeared in the movie, but so did Boudica. And she's got the same, you'll recognize her because she's got those almost like a Valkyrie, the side things on her headpiece. That's actually carries over to the movie, which is really cool. And R'amey Holl looks much more alien than she does in the book. But those movie designs, they did a really cool job of adapting some of those alien Green Lanterns and made them more alien and less humanoid, which I really appreciated.
Yeah.
So Ken's second question is, do you prefer Hal and Alan to be on separate Earths or the same Earth?
I'm going to go. I'd like to see them together. I would actually like to see them in a book together. I think they'd be really, really... I mean, I guess a lot of people have a problem writing how they would write these characters together because you'd be so constrained by what Earth are they on, what timeline are we in, yada, yada, yada. But at the same time, we tell Elseworld stories all the time. I mean, we're coming up with our third act on Deceased, you know? And this could be a great, great, great kind of story where Alan Scott gets his way to be incorporated into the Green Lantern mythos entirely. Because then you lose that ridiculous argument where it's like, Alan Scott's not really a Green Lantern and blah, 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 this and that. And it's like, okay, well, you know, he is. I mean, you might as well just put him in the petition that he is. You know, I mean, his origin may be different, and he may not be aligned with the core at the same time, but at the same time, I think he should be a part of it, you know, to be quite honest with you. I think he'd be a great figurehead for the core.
It's interesting because, you know, obviously when they designed Alan Scott, when Marty Nodell did all that work, the Silver Age version didn't exist, and later on, DC kind of went out of their way to figure out a way to tie those two mythologies together. So I get it. It'd be interesting. I don't know if I like the idea of him being tied to the core. I mean, they made him an honorary Green Lantern, essentially. And I don't have a problem with that. I don't want their histories to influence each other too much. But I do kind of sometimes miss the days when the Golden Age heroes were on Earth too, because they gave you two different sense of continuity that you'd explore and they didn't interfere with each other. So
Sure.
I liked the creativity that had and how you could do things that were similar but different, and it made sense because it was a different Earth.
Mm-hmm.
I also like the idea of Hal being the first Green Lantern. I know people will talk about the Dragon Lord book, and that's not really in continuity anymore. But I liked the idea of the Silver Age part of Hal being the first one. Obviously, that doesn't, Alan being a part of it doesn't impact it that greatly. But I kind of like the idea of Hal being on his own in that regard. So I could go either way. It depends on how it's executed, right? It depends on how well it's written.
Depends on who's writing it too. I mean, that's key.
Yeah.
You know?
You can have a writer come along and make it work really good and have a lot of synergy there. But then you can turn around and you can have a writer that can play it really poorly. So I'm not strongly opinionated in one direction or the other, to be honest.
I'm still baffled with all these solicits coming out that nobody's doing a Justice Society of America book. I don't understand that.
Agreed.
I don't understand that. I mean, that will never... I've asked that question to myself, I think, every single day for the past probably year or two, that they have all this stuff that's coming out and they're not doing a Justice Society book. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Especially with the Shazam movie, or not a Shazam movie, but with Shazam 2 coming out and Black Adam coming out, you would think there'd be something.
You'd think. I mean, come on now. But, whatever, man.
Well, I see they're doing, they're doing a Black Adam series, a miniseries. I think it's just a miniseries. And they just put in the solicitations today a Mary Marvel book. So I guess they're doing something, but I don't know. I loved the Jeff Johns JSA run.
Yeah.
That's actually what got me back into comics after Emerald Twilight. After Emerald Twilight and some of the Kyle era stuff, and I stuck around for about a year or so. It wasn't for me. I left because I was like, the only way DC's going to understand my dissatisfaction is if I don't buy the book. So that's what I did. And I left comics kind of altogether because I was kind of disgruntled by the whole thing. And in 90s comics, I thought were crappy, but that's just my opinion. But I kind of left for a while. And then when they started talking about Jeff Johns and doing JSA and saying this guy's a new up and comer, he's really good. This is like writing classic books. I was like, well, let me give it a shot. And I picked it up a couple issues and fell in love with it and was a diehard JSA fan and loved the dynamic of how he created new characters along with the old. They didn't bring back Mr. Terrific. They created a new Mr. Terrific, and it made sense. So I really enjoyed it. So I agree with you, Phil. I think JSA is a missed opportunity.
What year did that come out, that Jeff Johns run? Do you remember?
I don't remember. Gosh, it was...
I need to look that up. gonna reread that again. I haven't read that in quite some time, and that might be something I could revisit.
Yeah, I really enjoyed those books. I'd have to go back and look and see. Let me see if I can find it really quickly while we're talking. But Ken, I appreciate so much you giving us your thoughts, and they echo ours. And so, it all lines up. And if people like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't. It looks like JSA, he started writing it in 2000.
Okay. I'm gonna have to look. I wonder if there's a trade out, do you know?
There probably is, and it may be in a Jeff Johns omnibus of sorts, because he wrote quite a few issues. He had a pretty long run. He had like a 6-year run.
Yeah, because there's book 4. Okay.
But and for people that are looking for stuff to read, because maybe they don't like what's going on, check out that run because it was rock solid.
Yeah, John's a good writer, man. He should go back to what he has.
Yep. So, Powering, why don't you tell everybody how they can be a part of the show, and then we'll come back and sign off.
You can become a part of the show by leaving a message up to 1 minute long on our voicemail line. Call us at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can also email us at podcast@blogofoa.com. We'd love to hear from you.
This is Giancarlo Volpe, producer of Green Lantern, the animated series, and you're listening to the Podcast of Oa.
Welcome back, fellow Owens. Episode 211, checked and done, which is a cool episode. I mean, we got to meet the Lord Malvolio, and he's just an awesome character, and somebody needs to pick up on that and do something with him.
Yep, more unused, untapped potential.
Yeah, exactly what it is.
So I think we're going to do, and I think this came a suggestion from a listener as well. I can't remember exactly where it came from, but somebody said, hey, you did a great episode on Carol Ferris a little while ago. Maybe you should do one on Soranik Natu. So I think, Phil, that's what we'll do next episode. We'll do kind of a snapshot of Soranik Natu's history, maybe some issues that are really important for her character development. And then maybe is she, at the end of the day, the right one for Kal Rayner? Much as we thought was Carol the right one for Hal. So I think that'd be a great way to kind of a bookend the other episode.
I like it. It'd be fun too.
So we'll be back in a couple of weeks. Got to do some research. You're going to have to do some digging through the archives and go through some Soranik Natu stories. So we'll be back maybe 2-3 weeks. Depends on how long it takes us to dig up through the material and kind of prep ourselves a little bit. But I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a lot of fun. Soranik Natu is one of my favorite of the post-rebirth new creations. I think that character is incredibly well written and well developed, and I miss not seeing her on the page.
I mean, she should be up there with like characters like Mara. I mean, and maybe not as big as Wonder Woman, but I mean, she would equal somebody like Mara. I mean, just Cruz even.
Although Mara's kind of turned into a bit of a crap show.
Yeah, it's not looking very good for the character or the person playing the character. Morons.
There was a pun in there, but
I got it.
But at any rate, it'll be fun to look at that character. I'm excited about that. But yeah, more untapped potential. Apparently, now I haven't watched the episode all the way through yet, but you know how Green Lanterns have been featured in Young Justice. Somebody said that during the end credits of the most recent episode, there's something going on Oa, and you see, I think, Kilowog talking to someone, and it's just a still frame shot, but that the person there was a female voice, and the face looked kind of like Soranik Natu, but you're only seeing like the back of the chin and the side of the, just the back quarter of the face. But it'd be interesting if Soranik Natu is going to be in Young Justice.
They're really bringing out a lot of the Lantern stuff in there, aren't they?
Yeah, it's interesting. The story, this particular part of the season is very cosmic, and so that's cool. This most recent episode didn't have so much of the cosmic elements, but they kind of circled back to that in the end credits. I've got to go and watch that episode. I just haven't caught up to it yet.
Yeah, I gotta get to work on some of it.
It's hard keeping up with all this content we're getting these days. Not necessarily DC content, but all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, you're right. And having a kid, and
I haven't even watched the Peacekeeper stuff yet. I'm still on the Book of Boba Fett. That's how far behind I am.
Oh yeah, you're really behind.
Yep. Well, my friends, we'll be back in a few weeks, and we will start talking about some Soranik Natu stuff. Until then, Take care of each other, treat each other well, keep that power ring charged, and make every day your brightest day. The Podcast of Oa is the official podcast of the blog of Oa and a proud member of the Comics Podcast Network. Share your comments and questions by calling the show's voicemail line at 406-POD-OA. That's 406-763-6362. You can send your emails to podcast@blogofoa.com. You can also find the Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa on Twitter and Facebook. Green Lantern and other related characters are the copyrighted property of DC Comics Incorporated and are used without permission. The Blog of Oa and the Podcast of Oa are fan productions and do not claim any ownership over the Green Lantern or any other copyrighted property.